let's raise the big questions then. Can India and China really be partners and not rivals? You heard a perspective from Beijing there. Is the trust deficit too deep between India and China? Can China's alliance with Pakistan during Operation Sindoor be so easily forgotten? Is Trump tariff pressure the real reason for the India-China handshake? Will India, China and Russia now form a lasting troika? Joining me now, three very special guests, fine minds all. Brahma Chelani, leading strategic affairs expert. Kanwal Sibal, former foreign secretary, also served in Russia. KC Singh, former secretary, MEA. Appreciate all of you joining us. Brahma Chelani, to you first. You've been quite skeptical over the years of China in particular, believe that India needs to be very wary of China. How do you see what's happened in the last 24 hours? That India and China suddenly talking about being partners and not rivals?
Well, we should look at the larger context. We should not forget that this is Modi's China Reset 3.0. His China Reset 1.0 began soon after he became Prime Minister in 2014 when he invited Xi Jinping to India as the first important foreign leader hosted by him. But Xi Jinping arrived in India with an unusual gift, a deep Chinese incursion into the Chamar sector of Ladakh. Reset 1.0 ultimately failed because of the 2017 Doklam standoff. When that standoff ended, it was seen as victory for India's resolve, but within weeks thereafter, China quietly occupied the Doklam plateau. Today, Doklam is China's military stronghold, but the Chinese capture was obscured in India. Within a few months of the Doklam standoff, Modi initiated Reset 2.0 by reaching out to Xi Jinping. That led to the Wuhan summit and the summit in Mahabalipuram. But Reset 2.0 ended in disaster, with the Chinese military encroaching into key borderlands of eastern Ladakh in April 2020. That led to a series of border clashes and to a military standoff, which after more than 5 years has still not been fully resolved. Disengagement has happened, but not de-escalation or de-induction of forces from the frontier. Modi's Reset 3.0 began with the Kazan meeting with Xi Jinping last October and has been accelerated by Trump's economic war on India. But to launch Reset 3.0, India quietly dropped its demand that China restore status quo ante in eastern Ladakh. The MEA had said that status quo ante was a prerequisite to full normalization of bilateral relations. The army chief called status quo ante our first aim to achieve. But now, with little hope of getting China to roll back its encroachments, India is no longer seeking status quo ante. Instead, from the Prime Minister down, India is seeking, quote unquote, peace and tranquility along the LAC. Recent history offers a stark warning. An emboldened China could spring another nasty surprise on India before long. We've had a series of nasty surprises sprung on us.
So yours...
Oh. Yes, so,
I take your point. China has sprung a series of nasty surprises that therefore you believe, leaves you to believe that there can be no trust with a country like China. Kanwal Sibal, take up from what you heard from Brahma Chelani. There is a sense that this is pure short-termism. Because of the Trump tariffs, we are suddenly looking at China as a potential partner. Do you really believe that this is a sustainable basis for foreign policy? I mean, just a few months ago, we were accusing the Chinese of fusing their military technology with the Pakistanis, and it was based on hard evidence that defense experts were putting out.
Well, because of Trump's tariffs on India and the penalty tariffs, it appears as if Modi going to Tianjin is a response to that pressure. And the effort now is to establish a new kind of modus vivendi with China. I don't think this is quite correct, because when they two met in Kazan last year, Trump had not, there were no surprises like that on the tariffs front. It was, and then it's not only that, before the two leaders met, the military fellows, God knows they met 20, 22 times. I've forgotten the figure. The other group, which has diplomats and military fellows, led by the foreign ministry, they met again scores of times. In between, the special representatives had also met.
Sir, with due regard, Kazan was followed. Sir, with due regard, in the chronology, Kazan was followed by what happened during Operation Sindoor. I come back to it. Is there a short-termism? It may be the way diplomacy has to play out in a multipolar world. Let's be more honest about that. We have to look for tactical, strategic alliances.
I am coming to that. That the dynamics that we see between India and China is not related to what Trump has been doing. Now, with regard to Operation Sindoor and what have you, the fact is that we taught Pakistan a very bitter lesson. And now more and more evidence is coming out of the huge damage that was inflicted. And the Pakistani foreign minister has now admitted publicly that they are the ones who sought the ceasefire. And America had nothing to do with it. So all that tom-tomming about Chinese weaponry and all that you are mentioning about the giving access to them on Baidu and this and that. Yes, from our point of view, this is a serious provocation. And we must therefore very carefully assess the future, because Pakistan and China would now want to make up for the weaknesses in their defenses. And you can then see possibly much more military cooperation between China and India. But diplomacy cannot be such that you do not show some thinking and flexibility to manage very, very complex relationship. After all, we didn't even break our diplomatic relations with China after 1962.
No, I take your point.
Therefore, this is part of managing relations.
So I take your point about the need. Sir, what I call short-termism, you may call flexibility. KC Singh, respond to what you've heard just now from Kanwal Sibal. Do you believe that what we've seen here is a major breakthrough with Putin, Xi and Modi forming some kind of a troika? Or is this pure short-termism at the moment?
I think it's tremendous amount of optics, which were important if you have to handle Trump. Trump's reaction has already come. On Truth Social, he has already stated that, India has proposed zero tariffs, which are all lies. But the signal which needed to be sent to Trump was that you are driving India into this corner. For the last 25 years, quarter century, one assumption has been that India was critical to US's balancing of China. That assumption has been overturned by Trump. Now, therefore, we are looking for a new recalibration. And in that recalibration, you will have to reach out to China, you will have to reach out to the others, because you can't be left in the middle ground. But you look at just don't go to anything else, just look at the Tianjin declaration. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the points in that is a condemnation of the US and Israeli attack on Iran. We've never joined that attack till now. We've never joined that condemnation. But this time to sign on to that declaration is again a signal to America that we are now rebalancing between you. We are going where India was after 47. I mean, the current government may treat Nehru as a discard, but that's essentially what we were. That's essentially what non-alignment was. So there's a new kind of realignment taking place in the world. You've got China on one side. China will never accept India as a rival which should be allowed to rise in Asia. It wants to be a dominant power in the world. It wants just US and them. And it realizes that India is coming on the rebound. And I'm sure India also knows it. When we are engaging China, we know it. We have a weak set of cards we've gone to China with. They are not stupid. The Chinese know it and we know it. So relationship with China, it's always good to remember, will be always a combination of cooperation. I don't call it partnership. Cooperation, competition, and friction. All three will have to coexist. You'll have to balance all of them. All this hugging and handshaking, these are cooperation, competition, and friction.
Cooperation, competition, and friction. Very interestingly put there, KC Singh. Brahmachalani, you want to dive in? Here are two senior diplomats saying this is in a way a recalibration, perhaps forced, but it is a recalibration. At the end of the day, in a multipolar world that we see, we have to be nimble and flexible, which is one of the words used.
Well, flexibility is important. And after all, we are seeing a world in great geopolitical flux. We are seeing geopolitical realignments happening along with fundamental changes in the economic order. And in that context, no relationship can be static. So in that sense, reaching out to China and seeking to mend ties with China is something to be welcomed. The issue is that whether are we being guided by wishful thinking? Because wishful thinking does not constitute a path to progress. Or are we seeking to re-engage China from a position of weakness? Did Modi go to China with a weakened hand? Because he went to China after the Trump tariffs and sanctions on India. He went soon after Operation Sindoor, where India's own deputy army chief said that China was the invisible third party in that India-Pakistan conflict. Those are the more substantive issues to be discussed because for India, the meeting was also about geopolitical signaling. The dependence on Washington is not India's only option. And in fact, Trump's economic war on India is accelerating India's effort to mend ties with Beijing. But Xi Jinping is turning Trump's alienation of India into an opportunity to make New Delhi agree to fully normalize Sino-Indian relations, largely on Beijing's terms. That is without progress on the core disputes over security, trade, and the border that bedevil the bilateral relationship. It speaks for itself, as I mentioned earlier, that India has dropped its demand for restoration of status quo ante in eastern Ladakh. In other words, we have accepted Chinese occupation of areas that were being patrolled by Indians.
Can I therefore ask you, Kamal Sibal, a short answer? Have we gone into this with a weak hand? That the Chinese run the show and we simply have to just live by the fact that they will call the shots in this relationship? Or is this a relationship of equals in any sense?
I think one could make another argument that we went with a relatively strong hand. And I tell you why. We defied Trump. The only country defied, the European Union buckled down, South Korea buckled down, Japan buckled down. India stood firm. Number two, we gave a signal that we are not going to cease buying oil from Russia. We stood our ground on our relationship with Russia. This again was a show of self-confidence and strategic autonomy. These points cannot be ignored, even by Xi Jinping. And I think we are wise enough, we have experience enough to know that China cannot be trusted.
Right.
We have to manage a very difficult situation, which we'll do. But we have raised all our concerns. If you read between the lines of what the Prime Minister said in his bilateral talks with Xi Jinping, as well as his statement at the SCO, he's flagged all the issues of concern to us, to Xi himself. But Brahma is right. He didn't talk about status quo ante. I think
let me leave it. Let me leave it at that.
To discuss.
Okay. Let me leave it at that. Casey, you want a quick, I only have 20 seconds. You want a quick final word? What happens next?
No, what happens next is we'll have to see how Trump reacts. That statement is not overly aggressive. Is he fully aware of what went on there? Either he escalates the battle with India and goes to 50%, the rest of the trade, which he has exempted, or he starts becoming more flexible because he's coming under pressure for pushing India into this corner. And as Mr. Sibal said, it doesn't mean that we have bent over, because the Prime Minister did, when he was speaking, say that, no, I think we cannot, a settlement of the border is crucial to stability in bilateral relations, he continued to stick to that stand. So we'll have to, this will be diplomacy's challenge now.
Okay.
How to balance it. This is a new balancing game. And we need to see where it goes from here.
Let me leave it there. I appreciate all of you joining us. We live in uncertain times. You never know what tomorrow brings, especially with Donald Trump at the White House. But what we've seen today, purely in terms of optics, is extremely interesting because it shows just how flexible alliances have become across the world. Appreciate my guests joining me here on the news today.